Your self-talk sets your destiny because every thought you repeat becomes a silent architect building the framework of your life. When you speak strength, your mind begins to search for evidence of that strength. When you speak limitation, your mind starts confirming those limits. The internal dialogue you maintain becomes the script your actions follow, shaping how you interpret challenges, opportunities, and even your own potential. Over time, your words become a mirror reflecting not who you are right now, but who you are gradually becoming through the beliefs you feed yourself daily. When you consistently speak power and possibility, you condition your mind to expect growth rather than fear it. You start walking into situations with a sense of readiness instead of hesitation. Your inner voice sets the tone for how you respond to difficulty, how you recover from disappointment, and how you pursue future goals. If your self-talk is filled with doubt, you'll hesitate to take chances. If your self-talk is filled with purpose, you'll move forward even when you feel unprepared. The seeds you plant with your words grow into the habits that define who you are. Self-talk influences the risks you take, the standards you keep, and the expectations you set for yourself. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are capable, resourceful, and resilient, you begin to act in ways that confirm that identity, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your mind begins to align with the future you're speaking into existence. Each time you reinforce a positive belief with your self-talk, you weaken an old limiting pattern that used to hold you back. Old voices lose their power when new declarations are spoken with consistency and conviction. Slowly, your internal narrative stops replaying past failures and starts projecting future victories. This shift doesn't happen instantly, but every repetition moves you closer to a more empowered version of yourself. Your destiny is not shaped in moments of clarity alone, but in the quiet, ordinary moments when you choose what to say to yourself. The conversation you have internally influences your mood, your energy, and your willingness to take action. Even when no one is watching, your words are guiding your behavior. Even when nothing seems to change externally, something powerful is shifting inside you. As your inner dialogue becomes stronger, your decisions become bolder. You start stepping into rooms you once felt unqualified for, and you start pursuing goals that once felt impossible. Your self-talk becomes a steady reminder of who you are becoming, even when doubt tries to creep back in. It becomes a shield against negativity and a compass pointing you toward growth. You begin to notice that the way you talk to yourself determines the opportunities you're willing to chase. A positive inner voice encourages you to go after the things that stretch you, challenge you, and elevate you. A negative inner voice convinces you to settle. What you say internally determines whether you lean into your potential or retreat into your comfort zone. Over time, your self-talk becomes the belief system that influences how you handle adversity. When setbacks happen, instead of accepting defeat, you remind yourself that you are capable of rising. When something feels unfamiliar, you speak courage until it becomes natural. When you face uncertainty, you speak clarity until your mind begins to see a path forward. The language you choose during your hardest moments determines how your future unfolds. Self-talk is the invisible force that shapes your expectations for your life. When you speak with confidence, you raise the ceiling of what you believe is possible. When you speak with doubt, you lower your own potential without realizing it. The way you talk to yourself affects your persistence, your consistency, and your belief in your ability to create change. Your destiny is not determined by circumstances alone, but by your response to them. And that response is influenced by the voice you hear most often. You hear your own voice more than any other voice in your life, and that makes it the most powerful tool you possess. When you speak with intention, vision, and faith, you begin shaping a future that aligns with the greatness you've been called to step into, crafting a destiny built on the foundation of the words you choose to repeat to yourself every single day. Berber language comes before transformation, because the words you speak set the direction your life begins to move toward long before any visible change occurs. When you articulate a new possibility, you activate a new level of awareness within yourself. You start noticing opportunities you once overlooked, and you begin interpreting challenges through a lens of growth instead of defeat. Your language becomes a signal to your mind that a shift is taking place, even if your circumstances haven't caught up yet. It is the spoken declaration that awakens the dormant potential waiting to be expressed. Before you ever take a step, you speak a word, and that word becomes the first building block of your transformation. The language you use influences how you think, how you act, and how you show up in the world. If you tell yourself you are capable, your actions begin to reflect that confidence. If you tell yourself you are limited, you unconsciously align with that limitation. Long before change appears on the outside, change begins forming inside through the language you allow to circulate in your mind. Transformation requires a mental shift, and that shift is initiated through intentional language. Words shape thoughts, thoughts shape beliefs, and beliefs shape behavior. When you adopt new language, you disrupt old patterns that once held you back. You start creating a new narrative that supports your growth instead of reinforcing your fears. This new language becomes the foundation upon which your future identity is built, giving you the clarity and focus needed to move toward a higher version of yourself. Even when your environment hasn't changed, the language you use begins to rewire your perception of what is possible. Instead of accepting limitations, you start speaking possibilities. Instead of repeating old labels, you begin declaring new truths about who you are becoming. Your language becomes a declaration of intent, guiding you toward actions that align with the future you desire. Through consistent repetition, those declarations start shaping your internal reality. When you use language that elevates rather than diminishes, you open the door for transformation to unfold. You start giving yourself permission to rise, to evolve, and to pursue goals that once felt unreachable. This linguistic shift expands your imagination, and imagination fuels action. The more boldly you speak, the more boldly you act, because your words begin to generate a new level of belief and expectation within you. The language you choose each day trains your mind to think beyond present conditions. It lifts your vision higher and forces you to look beyond temporary obstacles. When you speak with clarity and conviction, your mind starts aligning with that clarity, producing solutions, ideas, and steps that move you forward. A renewed vocabulary creates a renewed mindset, and a renewed mindset becomes the birthplace of transformation. Transformation rarely begins in moments of inspiration. It begins in the quiet moments when you choose to speak differently about yourself, your goals, and your future. Your language becomes the soundtrack of your life, influencing your energy, your momentum, and your resilience. When you change your words, you change the way you approach difficulty and the way you interpret opportunities. This gradual shift in interpretation becomes the catalyst for major breakthroughs. As your language evolves, so does your identity. You can't speak as a victim and live as a victor. You can't speak doubt and walk in confidence. You can't speak failure and expect success. Your words must match the transformation you desire, even if you haven't seen the results yet. Speaking with purpose strengthens your inner alignment and prepares you to step into the version of yourself you are striving to become. Transformation demands courage, and that courage is often developed through the words you choose each day. When you speak life into your goals, you build emotional endurance. When you speak belief into your abilities, you develop mental strength. When you speak purpose into your journey, you create momentum that pulls you forward. Your language becomes your internal support system, pushing you beyond fear and into action. Every great change begins with a declaration. Before you see evidence, before you feel ready, before the path becomes clear, you speak the transformation into existence. The words you repeat become the roadmap, the fuel, and the force that carries you into the next version of your life, proving that language always leads the way long before transformation appears on the surface. Your words are commands, not commentary, because every statement you make forms an instruction that your mind begins to follow. When you speak, you are not simply describing how things are, you are directing how things will become. The subconscious mind doesn't differentiate between what you want and what you fear. It simply responds to the tone and direction of your words. This is why negative language produces negative outcomes and empowering language produces empowering outcomes. Your words issue orders that shape the way you think, act, and respond long before you realize the influence they hold. When you treat your words as commands, you begin to understand the responsibility that comes with speaking. You stop carelessly declaring defeat, doubt, or limitation because you know those statements trigger actions aligned with failure. Instead, you speak intentionally, knowing each word carries weight You begin to use language that sets a standard for your behavior, prompting your mind to rise to the level of what you speak rather than sink to the level of old patterns. Speaking becomes a strategic act rather than a casual habit. The commands you give yourself determine your emotional state, your confidence, and your outlook. If you say, I can't, your mind obeys. If you say, I'm capable, your mind starts searching for evidence of capability. Words activate thoughts, and thoughts activate habits. Over time, those habits form the life you experience. When you realize your words are instructions and not observations, you become more conscious of the dialogue you allow to leave your mouth and enter your mind. Your internal dialogue becomes the script your life follows. If you repeatedly say you're overwhelmed, you'll feel overwhelmed even in manageable situations. If you declare that you are focused and disciplined, your actions will begin aligning with that identity. This is not wishful thinking, it is mental programming. Your words form the messages your brain repeats, and repeated messages become the default settings that run your life. This is why intentional speech is essential for personal transformation. Commands spoken consistently shape expectations, and expectations influence performance. When you command yourself to rise, you unconsciously bring your behavior into alignment with that rise. When you command yourself to quit or shrink, your actions follow that downward trajectory. This relationship between language and behavior makes it impossible to speak in one direction and live in another. Your life eventually moves toward the direction of your dominant declarations. Every time you speak strength, you create a command that fuels resilience. Every time you speak purpose, you issue an instruction that drives clarity. Every time you speak victory, you activate determination. These commands guide your decisions in moments when your emotions would otherwise mislead you. Your feelings may fluctuate, but commands don't rely on emotions. They create structure, consistency, and direction that override temporary states of mind. Your words act as a compass pointing you toward the future you are building. When you speak with intention, you command your focus, your energy, and your discipline to support your goals. You stop living reactively and start living proactively. You stop waiting for situations to dictate your mood and start using your voice to dictate your mindset. In this way, words become tools for shaping possibility rather than reinforcing limitation. Speaking commands also reshapes your relationship with challenges. When you face adversity and tell yourself you are strong enough to handle it, you command your mind to search for strength instead of weakness. When you declare that you are learning and growing, you command your perspective to shift from frustration to development. Challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like assignments because your words direct how you engage with them. As you consistently speak commands rooted in growth, your identity begins to evolve. You no longer allow old language to keep you tied to old versions of yourself. You stop narrating your life from a place of scarcity and begin speaking from a place of intention and vision. This new language forms a new identity, and that identity shapes new behaviors that align with the future you are creating. Your words become the force that builds the version of you that your old commentary could never produce. With every command you speak, you train your mind to align with a higher standard. You condition yourself to rise above excuses, step beyond self-doubt, and engage with life from a place of purpose. Your words become the blueprint your actions follow and the foundation upon which your growth is built. When you embrace the truth that your words are commands, you begin shaping the life you desire with clarity and authority, using language as the tool that directs your transformation from the inside out. Speak louder than your circumstances because the volume of your voice determines the direction of your life far more than the weight of your challenges. Circumstances will always try to convince you that you're limited, stuck, or powerless, but your words have the ability to drown out those lies. When life gets loud with pressure, uncertainty, and setbacks, your declarations must become louder. Not louder in noise, but louder in conviction. Your voice becomes the anchor that steadies you when everything around you is shifting, reminding you that you are not defined by the conditions you are currently facing. When circumstances try to shrink your belief, you rise by elevating your language. Instead of repeating what you see, you speak what you believe. Instead of reinforcing what feels overwhelming, you declare the strength within you. This shift in self-talk doesn't ignore reality, it reframes it. The moment you speak with intention, you stop allowing your environment to shape your mindset and instead begin shaping your response to the environment. Your voice becomes the difference between remaining stuck and stepping forward with courage. Every circumstance comes with a choice. Let it silence you or let it sharpen you. When you choose to speak louder, you activate resilience. You remind yourself that difficulty is temporary and your identity is not rooted in external situations. Your words become fuel that reignites hope when discouragement tries to suffocate your motivation. Even when nothing seems to be changing, your consistent declarations create inner stability that circumstances cannot shake. Speaking louder than your circumstances trains your mind to rise above emotional reactions. It teaches you to respond from strength rather than fear. External pressure often pushes people into negative self-talk, but you choose the opposite path. You speak clarity when confusion surrounds you. You speak victory when obstacles mount. You speak purpose when uncertainty clouds your vision. This discipline of language becomes a powerful form of mental leadership, guiding you through seasons that would otherwise break your confidence. Your voice becomes the source of your momentum. When challenges appear, speaking with confidence keeps you moving when you would normally hesitate. It energizes your actions, sharpens your focus, and keeps your vision alive. Circumstances may slow you down, but they cannot stop you when your inner voice is louder than the noise around you. Your declarations become a reminder that you control your response, even if you don't control the situation. When you speak louder than your circumstances, you shift your identity from someone reacting to life to someone directing life. Your language sets a higher standard for how you engage with obstacles. You no longer allow setbacks to define your worth or delays to dictate your effort. You speak in alignment with the version of yourself you are becoming, not the version that once struggled. This shift in identity influences every decision, action, and habit you develop moving forward. The louder you speak, the clearer your vision becomes. Even when circumstances try to cloud your direction, your words cut through the fog. Your declarations remind you of your goals, your purpose, and your values. Instead of losing yourself in temporary hardship, you anchor yourself in long-term intention. Your voice becomes a compass that guides you back to your path whenever life attempts to distract or discourage you. Speaking louder than your circumstances strengthens your emotional endurance. It keeps you mentally alive during seasons where progress feels slow or invisible. This endurance becomes a powerful advantage because most people give up when circumstances become overwhelming, but your language prevents you from quitting. Your declarations keep you connected to your future when the present feels heavy, giving you the patience and persistence needed to keep moving. Your voice becomes a weapon that pushes back against negativity. When doubt whispers, you respond with certainty. When fear tries to control you, you respond with faith. When frustration rises, you respond with focus. By choosing your words intentionally, you shift the atmosphere around you and within you. You create an inner environment where growth is possible, even when external circumstances say otherwise. Every time you speak louder than your circumstances, you strengthen the belief that you are greater than what you're going through. You build a mindset that refuses to surrender to difficulty. You create a pattern of resilience that carries you through every season of life. Your voice becomes the force that lifts you above challenges, directing your life toward the future you are committed to building, regardless of what your circumstances try to tell you. Repetition becomes identity because what you say and do consistently eventually shapes how you see yourself and how you show up in the world. Every repeated thought reinforces a belief, and every repeated belief forms the foundation of your character. When you speak the same words often enough, your mind begins to accept them as truth, whether they empower you or limit you. This gradual internal shift doesn't happen overnight, but with each repetition, you are carving out the blueprint of the person you are becoming through the patterns you allow to dominate your thoughts. Repeated language creates mental grooves that your thoughts naturally follow. If you consistently speak confidence, your mind will start adopting confidence as the default mode. If you consistently speak doubt, your mind will respond by lowering your expectations and your effort. Repetition is powerful because it turns intentional thought into automatic behavior. What starts as deliberate self-talk becomes natural over time. and the words that once felt forced eventually become the voice that guides your decisions. Identity is not built in big dramatic moments. It is built in the daily repetition of thoughts, choices, and actions. When you show up with discipline again and again, discipline becomes part of who you are. When you speak purpose every day, purpose becomes your internal compass. When you repeatedly affirm strength, your mind begins to search for strength within you, even during difficult moments. Repetition solidifies qualities that once felt unfamiliar until they become traits you embody without thinking. Your habits follow your repeated beliefs. If you repeatedly tell yourself you're someone who follows through, you will begin behaving like someone who takes action. If you repeatedly say you're someone who grows, you will naturally pursue learning and improvement. The repetition of these declarations builds a sense of identity that influences every aspect of your behavior, not because you are forcing yourself, but because you are becoming someone who naturally aligns with those beliefs. Repetition also helps you override old patterns that once controlled your mindset. The beliefs you carried from your past were formed through repetition. Words you heard often, experiences you repeated, labels you accepted over time. To change these patterns, you must replace them with new, intentional repetition. Little by little, consistent declarations push out outdated narratives, allowing new beliefs to take root and reshape your identity from the inside out. When you repeat empowering words long enough, they begin to influence how you interpret challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you start seeing them as opportunities. Instead of viewing setbacks as signs of failure, you see them as part of your growth. This shift doesn't happen because circumstances change, but because your repeated language rewired your perspective. Your identity becomes stronger, more grounded, and more aligned with your goals. Repetition builds confidence even before you see results. Saying I'm capable every day builds internal certainty long before you experience major accomplishments. This certainty becomes the foundation that drives you to take risks you once avoided. Through repetition, your mind begins trusting your own voice more than the fears that once held you back. What you repeat becomes the standard your actions try to meet, pulling you into alignment with the person you've declared yourself to be. The more you repeat a belief, the more difficult it becomes to break away from it. This works both ways, which is why intentional repetition is crucial. When you repeatedly reinforce positive identity traits, you make it increasingly natural to live in alignment with them. You no longer have to force yourself to be disciplined, focused, or courageous. Those qualities become part of your default identity because your mind has been conditioned to operate from that space. Repetition also creates emotional stability. When you speak empowering words daily, you build inner strength that helps you stay grounded during stressful or uncertain seasons. Your identity is no longer shaken by temporary feelings because repetition has anchored you in a deeper truth about who you are. You start responding from identity rather than emotion, allowing you to make better decisions and maintain forward momentum. Over time, repetition transforms who you believe you are. The words you consistently speak become the thoughts you accept, the beliefs you adopt, and the actions you take. Identity is not something you discover, it is something you build through repetition. And with every repeated declaration of strength, purpose, discipline, and resilience, you are shaping the future version of yourself, long before anyone else can see the transformation taking place within you. You become what you tell yourself because your inner dialogue sets the boundaries of your belief and the direction of your behavior. Every statement you repeat internally becomes a defining message that shapes your identity, your confidence, and your sense of capability. When you tell yourself you are strong, your mind begins to activate inner strength. When you tell yourself you are limited, your mind confirms those limits. Over time, these repeated messages build the framework of who you believe you are, influencing the way you move through every challenge and opportunity. Your self-talk becomes the lens through which you see your potential. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are meant for more, you begin searching for ways to grow and stretch beyond comfort. If you tell yourself you're not enough, you shrink your own possibilities without even realizing it. The beliefs you feed yourself determine the choices you make, the risks you take, and the standards you accept. Your life follows the voice you trust the most. And for most people, that voice is the one inside their own mind. The words you speak to yourself influence the identity you adopt. Identity is powerful because it dictates your habits, your persistence, and your responses to adversity. If you tell yourself you're someone who always finds a way, you'll fight through obstacles with determination. If you tell yourself you're someone who always falls short, you'll stop trying before the breakthrough arrives. Your internal narrative shapes the version of yourself you bring into the world each day. Your self-talk becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People often underestimate how deeply their own words impact their behavior. When you say, "I can't," your body responds with hesitation. When you say, "I will," your body responds with effort. This connection between language and action is why transformation begins internally long before results appear externally. Your life rises to the level of the instructions you repeat to yourself, even in quiet moments when no one else hears them. The more you reinforce a belief, the more your mind aligns with it. Telling yourself you are capable creates a mindset that looks for solutions. Telling yourself you are unworthy trains your mind to look for shortcomings. These subtle shifts become powerful over time, steering your energy, your decisions, and your perception of what is possible. You start becoming either a product of your fears or a product of your faith, depending on which message you feed the most consistently. What you tell yourself determines how you interpret challenges. If your inner voice says you're resilient, obstacles become opportunities to grow. If your inner voice says you're helpless, obstacles become walls that confirm your fears. You begin navigating your journey based on internal beliefs rather than external circumstances. Your internal language becomes the filter through which you respond to both adversity and possibility. Your self-talk influences your emotional state. Encouraging words create confidence, discipline, and focus. Negative words create anxiety, discouragement, and hesitation. When you repeatedly tell yourself something, your nervous system responds accordingly. This emotional alignment influences how much effort you put into your goals and how well you bounce back from setbacks. Your internal narrative becomes the engine that fuels your emotional resilience. You become what you tell yourself because repeated messages turn into internal truths. Even if those messages weren't true at first, consistency makes them feel real. This is why speaking intentionally is so important. You can overwrite old insecurities by feeding yourself new declarations. You can replace doubt with belief by choosing language that supports the identity you want to build. Your mind will eventually conform to the story you tell yourself most often. What you tell yourself determines the expectations you place on your own life. High expectations create higher effort. Low expectations create excuses. If your inner voice tells you that you are destined to grow, you approach life with the assumption that progress is possible. If your inner voice tells you you'll always struggle, you unconsciously sabotage your potential. Your expectations become the limits or the leverage that shape your future. You become what you tell yourself, one thought, one declaration, and one repeated message at a time. The person you are today is the product of the words you fed yourself yesterday, and the person you are becoming tomorrow will be shaped by the words you speak today. Your internal dialogue forms the identity that guides your choices, fuels your discipline, and builds the foundation of the life you are creating from the inside out.